we do is we kind of go in and we look at, I want you to think about the four key pillars that I talked about to a great sales system.
Welcome, everybody, to today's C-Suite Support Council meeting. I'm Tricia Ben. I'm the CEO of C-Suite Network, and I want to introduce you to none other than Paul Whitley. He's one of our hero leaders here in the C-Suite, and of course, he's also the chair of the C-Suite Support Council. Now, Paul is a fractional CFO with a mission to help businesses grow exponentially with extensive experience in creative problem solving, operations, management, coaching, mentoring, and training. I will say, far beyond that, one of those people that you can count on to go to for just about anything that's troubling you in terms of how you're scaling your business.
Thank you, Tricia. Today, we're going to be talking about growing businesses to be more valuable. Learn how to build the foundations of a great sales system that endures long after you transition or not. We'll discuss the foundation pillars of world-class sales system, find ways you can build, rebuild, or improve them. We're also going to look at value drivers that, when in place, make your business grow and create enterprise value. Today, we're going to be talking to Chris Goade. He's the owner of 360 Consulting. His mission is to coach leaders to drive their businesses, achieve exponential success, and the company was developed on the founding principles of developing relationships, which I can attest to with Chris, identifying gaps using outside diverse perspective, focusing to achieve record-breaking sales results, and as a vision leader is to get leaders out of the weeds, getting them out of the weeds so they can execute with precision every time, every client. With that, I'd like to introduce Chris Goade.
360 Consulting is a group of sales consultants, sales coaches, and sales advisors. We work with companies in the small to mid-market, 3 or 4 million in revenue, all the way up to, a couple of $100 million in revenue. We help those companies build the right sales systems for their business. Before I did this almost 10 years ago, I was in the corporate world. I worked for some really great companies. And in those really great companies like them and PepsiCo and others, I took over sales teams and I found them to be functionally dysfunctional. Businesses often just look at the result. And we all know that the result is a culmination of everything that's built up to the result. So we help companies build out solid sales infrastructure and sales systems that will be sustainable and help them grow.
Well, let's talk a little bit about how you do these things, Chris, because you've been successful and we want to introduce you to the world. What do you do when you get out there to break through those barriers to get to that next level?
You hit plateaus in business. It's hard to get to your first 5 million. It's harder to get to the 10 million. It's hard. If you're at 50 million, it's hard to get to the $100 million mark. What we do is we kind of go in and we look at, I want you to think about the four key pillars that I talked about to a great sales system. A really defined go-to-market strategy. What does that mean? Who are your ideal customers? What is the value proposition that you deliver to those customers? And how do you teach your team to clearly understand that and articulate that in everything that they do every day? Second pillar is, we talk about people. You have great salespeople, great sales leaders in a business, but oftentimes we look at companies and they don't have the right seat in their sales organization. So it's more than just people. What are the roles and responsibilities for that sales organization? And quite frankly, over the last 5 to 10 years, that's changed so much. We've all heard sales process. It's a very overused term, but we take a look at companies and say, what are you doing in 3 distinct different sales process functions? One, what is your top of funnel process? How do you create opportunities for new customers or for existing customers? How do you define that? What marketing needs do you have to tie to your sales team? And how do you tie sales and marketing together so they work really well so you're generating opportunities? And then once you get the opportunity, how do you actually work a sales process to win business and do it in a really effective and clearly defined way? And then one of the biggest missed opportunities with a lot of customers we work with, our clients often are interacting with their existing customers, but they don't have an intentional and specific planned way for account management and relationship management. Do you clearly have account plans and define ways to find those opportunities? And so that's also part of sales process. The fourth leg of our four-legged stool, once you have these things, how do you manage them? People often leave companies because of their supervisor. How do we build a sales meeting that people want to attend? How do we train and develop those folks ongoing? How do we build KPIs that are meaningful KPIs, just not measuring activity for the sake of activity? So if you think about those four key pillars, we usually walk into a company, understand what's working, what's not working, where are the gaps, and then we move into the phase 2 of the project where we help those companies work on that whole sales system in those four key pillars.
That's pretty comprehensive in what you were just talking about. For years, I was involved in implementing CRM programs, customer relationship management. And I know in your platform that you work with that constantly of building that funnel. First, how do you get them into the funnel? Once they're there, how do you market and work them through the funnel?
Yeah, it's a great question, Paul. One of the things that you and I run into, and we see it all the time, is entrepreneurs, we all get in our business and we are the rainmaker initially, right? But how do you step out of that seat and how do you transfer that knowledge and that understanding to your team? Clearly defining the roles and responsibilities for everyone on that team. When you interview and you recruit, that you're actually using an interviewing process. One time or two times often we find is not enough to really understand, is this the right candidate for the job? Once you have identified that candidate and you've got your ideal client profile and you go through a proper interview process, do they want to really be with your team? Are they a culture fit? Once you've understood the skill set level, how do you onboard them? So many times, Paul, we find companies that they don't have a defined onboarding process. They might have the HR stuff, but they don't really have a defined process to actually onboard and train someone for the role that they're going to be put in. So we could build out onboarding plans that go 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 6 months, depending on the company and the business and the role for that person, so that we're really benchmarking and helping them along the way. And then quite frankly, compensation plans are a big driver of success, believe it or not. Is your comp plan for your sales team driving the behaviors that you want? Do they really understand how to connect the dots between what they do and their compensation? And is it driving the behaviors that you want in your business? And then once you get those people on board, there needs to be ongoing development. You might be a smaller business and maybe you don't have a way to move people up. You could develop them ongoing. You could find ways for them to drive additional compensation through growth. Whether you're using an outside recruiting service, we do that with partners, or you're doing it in your own staff, doing recruiting. Once you identify a candidate, usually you've determined skill set is there, or you wouldn't bring them into the interviewing process. Validating that skill set, we use behavioral assessment tools. We prefer predictive index. Are their core behavior styles a fit for the core behavior styles for someone in this role? We help companies figure that out. And we do that early on in the game so that we really understand whether they can be a fit. And then we use it as an opportunity to interview to kind of validate, are they going to be a right fit for the role? Once you get past those things, Paul, now I'm really looking for culture fit. Are they going to fit into the organization? I ask business owners all the time, can you see yourself working with this person in your business every day? Can you see this person as part of your team and as part of a fit for your team? Are they going to really meld into the culture of your business? And so as we go through that process, I've also found that, people they try to go too fast in the hiring process. So oftentimes we're setting up a 4-step interview process for these candidates to continue to validate skill set, but more importantly, the mindset and the culture fit for the business.
I've taken the culture index test for 5 different companies over probably 3.5 years. Having the information in front of you is excellent, but working with them to see what does that mean in total as opposed to what it appears on that piece of paper. What are your thoughts about the test, the validity of the test, and how you apply them to make sure that seat is filled with the right person or with a person that could be the right person?
There are multiple tools out there. Culture Index is a fantastic one, the one you mentioned. I look at those things and first of all, do you understand what the fit for that role is? What is the profile for that role? And then how does the candidate line up against that profile? It's one point of measurement. It's not the only thing. It's one thing. We're really looking for, are they close enough to that fit that I want to continue the interview process? If not, oftentimes early in the game, especially hiring new people into your business, you might say, you know what? I can see after talking to this person and understanding their profile and what is a great fit for the role of behavior style. Maybe this person is not right for this role. Maybe they're right for another role in the business, and that's okay. But it's really kind of honing in those things, using that data as part of your interviewing process as well. There's no perfect tool that says, oh, this is going to guarantee someone be successful. It's a good data point and a good reference for part of your interviewing to kind of vet those things out so you can clearly understand.
Now your team is going to sit in, get to know that person, get the nuances of that company, and you're going to be basically training, developing, and holding them responsible to the areas that company wants. Walk me through what your company does to improve that person to the skill sets and the environment of the company that you're hiring them for?
Well, once we have a really clear understanding of the role and the responsibilities for that role, we've got a candidate, we've gone through the interview process, we bring them on board. We then start to work on not just the onboarding plan, but how do we snap them into the roles and responsibilities that we want them to do every day in the most reasonable amount of time as possible so that we can start to build out the proper KPIs and measurements. And I think when you think about sales roles in a business, I've had businesses where it took salespeople 90 days, 180 days, maybe even a full year to fully ramp up to their run rate. We look for ways to get people snapped into that process, looking to build out those KPIs for that role so that we have measurements beyond the result, as far upstream as we can possibly get, so that we're measuring that and we know that it's going to build to success. And then I think when you bring people into a business, or you have people in a business that maybe aren't having the success that they want or that you want for them, it's also the same way. You can kind of start over with people in a business, with salespeople in a business in the same way.
While our primary KPI function is in the financial area, we also help build out in the marketing and the sales area. And we try to do that with their existing people. One of the things that we see in companies is they don't measure what they expect. And if you don't measure what you're expecting, you're not going to get what you're expecting most of the time. Us being part of Exit Planning Exchange is very important to us, but that turns me around to, okay, we're up and running. We've got the company, got the people in place. Now we want to talk about the value of our company. What is your company's position on trying to work with customer saturation to get that company out of that risk plan?
Well, first of all, you have to identify it as a problem, and you have to clearly understand where the gap is and what you need to do to solve that problem. So I kind of go back to, if I have customer saturation issues, I'll probably have what we would term as some ideal customers or clients that are part of that mix. Once I understand that, I can identify others out there that look and act like them. So those become targets for the business. And oftentimes, Paul, when we see businesses that have that saturation issue, it's because they're not really focused on adding new customers. The salespeople have gotten into more of an account management kind of mentality, which might be really important for that business. Maybe you need to bring in new people who are nothing but hunting new business opportunities. We've also worked with companies to say, hey, guess what? Maybe you shouldn't have an annuity plan for your salespeople. Maybe there's a bifurcation in roles, and you say, after a given period of time, that customer transitions over to an account manager, and then you have your hunters going out and continue to hunt for new clients. So it's really about understanding the business, understanding their value proposition and their ideal customers, building out real targets, and then making them into new customers. Every business is a little bit different, Paul, as you know, but you've got to really develop that plan. Because if you don't develop a plan and you just say, I have a problem, but I don't have a plan, you're going to probably just continue to have that problem.
Quite often we're asked, hey, can you help us build out a comp plan? Share with me how you would build out comp plans to help companies.
Look at it from a higher level view and think about the entire plan and the whole go-to-market for that business. One of the drivers can be compensation, certainly. And I think too often those scenarios where I just get the same commission on this customer over and over and over, it doesn't drive the right behaviors. So changing the compensation plan can be a driver for that. Believe it or not, the team really understanding what they're being held accountable for is probably as big a driver as anything, because if they don't know and they don't understand the plan and they don't understand the importance of acquiring new business, then you've left them guessing. And that's not on them, that's on you. What we really do is we help companies understand what is the role that we expect from this person. If we are able to clearly paint the picture of what success is, then people will drive to those things because they don't want to roll out of bed and fail every day. They want to roll out of bed and be successful. It's clearly building the KPIs and the accountability for the role. It's one of the most important things in the world to have a one-on-one. It might be nothing more than 20 or 30 minutes, but we're going to spend 20 or 30 minutes every week one-on-one with everyone on the sales team around their KPIs, their responsibility, their goals. How are they doing? What are they going to do next? Building in that accountability. And the more you do that, the more they're going to lean into it. They don't lean away. They lean into it because guess what? They want to do good. And do good may be, hey, maybe my results aren't quite there, but I've built a great pipeline and all the deals in my pipeline are real. Help people win every day, every week, every month, every quarter. We win incrementally. We don't win just snapping our fingers.
When I was in a company that had retail business and we had almost 600 salespeople, we absolutely went through one-on-ones. We had them do sales training with each other. Every salesperson, we'd team them up to where there'd be 2 every week, and they'd go through a sales process. And it literally was for running that 100-yard dash 100 times before the customer walks in front of you, and you're prepared to sell both in the selling skill, but in the product in which you're selling. Talk to me about how you get involved developing the tools, the KPIs, and processes that set those things in place.
The top professional athletes in the world go to training camp or spring training or whatever their sport is, and guess what they're working on? They're working on the fundamentals that they worked on when they were in Pee Wee ball. And so as sales professionals, we need to do the same thing. We need to be always honing our craft and always learning. So we help companies clearly define their KPIs and the work around that and the process and the measurements, the right ones. Like when I get an opportunity to win a piece of business, whether it's a new customer or an existing customer, what are the steps? How do I work that process? I was just with a client last week, Paul, a company that's very mature in their industry and has a very mature sales organization. These guys and gals are super knowledgeable about their business. And what did we work on? We spent a half a day on their sales process. We spent a half a day on how to generate new opportunities from existing customers. We spent that time going through, how do I do a great discovery? What are the questions that I need to be asking? Maybe I even have the answers to those questions, but I'm not asking them for me. I'm asking them for the customer so they know they're important. How do I understand how to get a commitment to be open and transparent? All of these steps we document for companies. They're not the same for every business. They're oftentimes quite a bit different for other businesses. What are the steps in that company's sales process? And what are the right KPIs in that top of funnel activity that are really meaningful? Now I can go back and say, hey, you know what? We use a tool with companies. Here's our revenue goal for an individual or for the company. And then we back into what's the pipeline of opportunities need to be able to achieve that revenue goal? What are the things that I need to do to be able to create those opportunities, whether that's prospecting, cold calling, marketing, inbound leads, whatever those things are, we build out all of those metrics for our clients. So they've got meaningful KPIs that are a true indicator of future success. A pipeline that is a predictable pipeline. How many times, Paul, have you gone into a business and say, well, let's look at your pipeline of opportunities? And you start ticking down the list and you realize, they really don't have a pipeline because they've messed their sales process up so much that these deals are all stuck, right? Most of them are no's. They just haven't been told no yet. We need a pipeline that is a true predictor of future success and future revenue. And what does that do for a great CFO like you? It gives you an opportunity to say, gosh, we can start resource planning for our production facilities, our people needs, or whatever those things are. We help companies build that out. And the longer that they execute against that, the more predictable that becomes. Even if you have to tweak it and fine tune it as you go, that's the predictability. That's the sustainability that sales organizations in every business need and want and crave. And we help them build that.
I absolutely appreciate the direction you were talking there. And what I want to talk about now or move to is how does 360 Consulting build out sales engines for small, medium-sized businesses? What is your 30,000 down to 1,000 foot level of going into a brand new client and taking them to where they just had a 30% increase because you were there?
I want you to really hone in on the 4 key pillars of a great organization, a great sales system, really working on that go-to-market strategy. Who are ideal customers? Who are not? Value proposition, messaging, targets. I tell businesses all the time, if the world is your oyster, you're probably going to fail. Where are your niches? Where do you have real success? Where can you really leverage lowest hanging fruit and focus on that oftentimes first and then continue to expand on it? There's magic in every business and we're there to dig it out. And then we build the plan, Paul, to work with them over a 4 to 6 month period to put all those things in place. Clearly defined go-to-market, people, organization, structure, compensation, training, development for all that sales organization. And then how do we manage all those things? How do we put a management system in place to measure those KPIs, to have productive one-on-ones with the sales team? And once you do that and you get those 4 key pillars of a great sales system in place, you'll start to see that incremental improvement over and over. And that repetition builds and builds and builds. And guess what? Now that we have it all defined, we can go back and revisit it every quarter quarter and what needs to change. Once we have that stake in the ground, we don't put it in concrete, we just put it in sand. We can move it incrementally to get better and better and better over time. Without measuring those things, Paul, you're kind of left guessing. And there's nothing worse in business than guessing.
My moniker is I'm a fractional CFO that helps companies grow exponentially. I want to get into what is their revenue split and then what are their needs in the company? Do they need a marketing company to come in? Do they need a sales company? Do they need a CHRO, human resources? Do they have these issues they have to deal with? Part of our job as a member of the management team as a CFO is to look globally, not just prepare financial for month-end reporting, but now that I've got a report, go to that CEO and say, now let's talk about where you want to be. That's where I see our company working with your company. From my viewpoint, I appreciate you and your team more than you can imagine.
Oftentimes in business, it's the incrementality that wins the day. And as business owners, we look at the end result. And the end result is the true measure.
Chris, there's got to be a ramp up period from the time that you get a new salesman, saleswoman. What are the expectations? What do you tell them? And then what is a typical ramp up to get them fully engaged in generating revenue?
It's different for different businesses. You probably know what that is in your business. If you don't, you need to figure that out. Is it 30 days? Is it 60 days? Is it 90 days? And then think about where, if I want to build a revenue goal of $1 million as an example for a salesperson, what's the average size of the opportunity? What's my typical close percentage? And then you can build a pipeline goal. And then you can back into the activities that person needs to do, whether it's networking or cold calling, could be multiple things. Build those KPIs out early so that you know they're doing the right things. They're building pipeline and you can see that that ramp is coming. The only thing I would say about pipeline is, especially with new people, I'm very big on in that one-on-one with that salesperson, reviewing every deal in the pipeline. Are they following the sales process? Do they know the budget? Do they know the decision criteria? Do they know all these things that we must know to be able to win a deal? Is it still alive or is it just nebulous? I don't have a confirmed next step with that customer. So if you build those things out, Jason, you can see whether they're having success or not. The one thing that I always tell people in this scenario, if there's not success, take corrective action early, right? We can't control when we get ink on paper and win the deal, but we can control everything leading up to that. 60 days in, you probably know whether that person is going to be successful or not. Build a way to be able to clearly understand that without any ambiguity.
Chris, what are some common pitfalls entrepreneurs should avoid when scaling their sales processes?
Biggest one is they don't define them, because oftentimes entrepreneurs were the ones who built the business, started the business, they're passionate about it, and they have a very hard time transferring that knowledge. And for them, it's just second nature. It's like, why don't you understand this? We'll work with companies to workshop that sales process. We'll spend hours, with companies and their sales team and the business owner, the entrepreneur who started the business, and we dig that out. What do we need to do? What are the steps? So that we clearly define those things. And that's how we get that knowledge transfer. Often there's magic in that business. There's magic in that entrepreneur's brain. And we need to dig that out and transfer that knowledge. And that really is helpful in defining those things and being able to hold people accountable and teach them.
The sales component of what we do in our organizations is sort of the most mystical, magical, challenging, amazing, incredible roles we have. And in fact, many argue that everybody's on the sales team in an organization, and there's a lot to be said for that. I'm curious, that whole dynamic of creating healthy competition or healthy conflict, then you raised the whole idea of being part of a great team and seeing success. And I'm wondering how you've seen that best executed in terms of those two pieces coming together. And I think we've all been part of nightmare scenarios where you don't even want to walk in the place. But how have you seen the best bringing those two pieces together where there's a healthy, fun competition, but you're part of a winning great team?
We're huge believers in using CRMs and reporting and dashboards, and stack ranking your sales team is not a negative thing. It's a positive thing. No one wants to be at the bottom. You have to have a good team, the right culture in your business for this to work. And ultimately you have to have the right measurements, because different roles might be measured differently. So maybe I've got account managers who have big customers. Maybe I measure them differently than I I do my new people or my pure hunter role salespeople. But those dashboards and stack ranking create healthy competition and a healthy environment. I'll quickly tell you just a real story. I had a business that I was in my corporate life, and we had a margin problem. And so we wanted to pay, let's pay the salespeople on margin. Well, in spite of our best efforts, our systems just wouldn't calculate it the way we wanted to. We did nothing more than stack rank our team. We give them more information. We give them better cost of goods information, pricing guardrails, and we set the goal. And we said, hey, this is where we want to be margin wise. And once we did that, they needed information and they needed training, first of all. But once we stack ranked everyone, our gross margin went from 40% to 50%, and we didn't pay a penny to get it. All we did was communicate, teach, set the goals, and stack rank our team, and we got the improvement.
There are a few assumptions in what you're saying. There has to be a decent culture to start with, because otherwise you're going to be in the same pitting each other against each other kind of scenario. But I'm curious, what do you recommend is the most effective way to run that meeting with those KPIs and the dashboard?
Along with sales acceleration, we've built a framework just for sales organizations. For sales meetings, we use a specific agenda that's similar to an L10 for EOS. Quite frankly, we build a scorecard, that meaningful scorecard for the team. The death nail of a sales meeting is to go through a pipeline, one deal at a time. And now you've got 10 people in the room and you're talking about Paul's pipeline, and no one but you and Paul care about his pipeline. The other team members don't really care about that, right? So take your one-on-ones for your deep dive with those individuals and keep your sales team meeting probably shorter with a really defined proper scorecard and agenda. And it'll be a way more productive sales meeting that people don't dread.
And the last thing I'd say is the more you're grateful for what you have, the more you'll have to be grateful for. Chris, thank you for spending the time with us. Thank you all that attended.